A fragile Black Sea truce has emerged from US-brokered talks, marking the first formal ceasefire between Russia and Ukraine since Donald Trump's return to the White House. But mistrust runs deep, and the deal's survival depends on Washington's enforcement. The White House released 2 separate readouts, one for Ukraine, one for Russia, outlining commitments to safe navigation, eliminating the use of force, and preventing the use of commercial vessels for military purposes. It also secured pledges to develop measures, halting energy infrastructure attacks, a key battlefield tactic for both sides. The terms, however, reveal glaring asymmetries. The US-Russia deal offers Moscow the prospect of sanctions relief on agricultural and fertilizer exports, a long-standing Kremlin demand. Kyiv, in contrast, refuses any concession that eases economic pressure on Moscow. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said the truce would take effect immediately, but warned that any Russian violation would prompt him to urge Trump for more sanctions and military aid. "We have no faith in the Russians, but we will be constructive," he stated.
We are taking the right steps. These are the first steps, not the very first, but initial ones with this presidential administration towards completely ending the war and the possibility of a full ceasefire, as well as steps toward a sustainable and fair peace agreement.
Moscow remains equally distrustful. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said any deal could only work if Washington directly guaranteed Ukrainian compliance, citing past ceasefires that collapsed when Kyiv regained battlefield momentum.
Considering all these changes of mind, and the fact that each time a ceasefire was suddenly announced, and Ukraine agreed to it only because at that specific historical moment in question, Ukraine found itself in an untenable position on the battlefield. As soon as a pause took place, immediately, within weeks or a couple of months, this ceasefire was grossly violated, as was the case throughout the duration of the Minsk agreements. Therefore, we now need the clearest, most specific, verifiable, functioning guarantees and mechanisms. Our position is simple, as I have just outlined approximately. We cannot take his word for it.
The agreement follows weeks of diplomatic maneuvering, including high-level talks in Saudi Arabia and separate phone calls between Trump, Putin, and Zelensky. Trump initially proposed a broader 30-day ceasefire, accepted by Ukraine, but rejected by Putin, who settled for a more limited Black Sea, an energy-focused truce. The 30-day pause on energy strikes, effective from March 18th, is a critical part of the deal. Russia has repeatedly targeted Ukraine's power grid with missiles and drones, while Kyiv has struck Russian oil and gas facilities in retaliation. Ukraine remains wary of Russian naval movements. Defense Minister Rustem Umerov warned that any unauthorized deployment of Russian warships beyond designated zones in the eastern Black Sea would be treated as a violation, justifying self-defense. The maritime ceasefire addresses an issue that once fueled a global food crisis. Russia had imposed a de facto naval blockade on Ukraine's grain exports, but recent Ukrainian attacks forced Moscow's fleet to withdraw from much of the Black Sea. Both sides now look to Washington for enforcement. Ukraine warns that Russia will exploit any pause to regroup, while Moscow insists US guarantees are the only way to ensure Kyiv's compliance. The fragile truce rests on Trump's balancing act,